Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Developing Your Leadership Legacy Today, sponsored by Insights Learning and Development, and presented by Doug Upchurch and David Voorhees. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for IHR certification credits, HRCI webcast with certification credit, e-learning credit, and SHRM credits. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast to receive your credits. You will receive an email from HR.com within 1 to 2 business days, which will include the certification credit information. Questions may be submitted anytime during the webcast by typing the question in the Ask a Question text field and clicking Submit, the orange button located on your screen. And I will now turn it over to Doug.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, everybody. We're so glad you're here today. My name is Doug Upchurch. I'm Head of People Development for Insights, and my colleague David Voorhees, who is Head of Learning and Development for the sales group at Waste Management, will be joining me in just a few minutes. So I'm excited. We're both really excited to share with you today a little bit about developing your leadership legacy. This is a topic that's very close to both of our hearts and something that we are really excited to talk about today and just kind of share our two different perspectives. So first of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us. Wanted to have a little video chance so you can say hi. We'll turn the video off in just a second, but we also wanted to give you we also hope that you'll engage with us and interact with us. Although we don't have chat all the time, we will have some space for you to ask questions, and we may even use that question and answer part of GoToWebinar to maybe get you guys to send us some input in a little bit. And we've got a couple of polls as well that we'll share with you as well. So thanks for being here. And on behalf of David and myself, Insights and Waste Management, we just want to say thanks for taking time out of your day to be with us. So a little bit about myself, first of all, and I'm Head of People Development at Insights. Insights is a global learning and development company. Our focus is partnering with leading organizations around the world to create a world where people understand themselves and others and are inspired to make a positive difference in everything they do. My role is a little different. I'm actually our internal learning and development director, so I do basically very similar to a lot of you out there that might be in HR roles or learning and development roles for your own organization. I'm an internally focused leader in our business. I have responsibility for developing all of our leadership development programs, our management training, and all kinds of other things that we do in terms of what you might think of as very traditional learning and development things. Of course, at Insights, we like to think they're not quite done in a traditional way, but we have a lot of fun with them. And I'll let David introduce himself when he's back online with us. And Kathy, I'll just ask you to interrupt as soon as he is back online with me, if you could, or make sure I know. But I'll give him a chance to introduce himself when he's back online as well. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties with his connection this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my webcam off. You've seen my mug enough, and we'll get started with the next part. So let's go ahead and take a look at the topic of what we're going to be doing, the overview. And again, we'll give David a chance to introduce himself in just a little bit. Today we want to talk to you about the differences between reputation and legacy. We're going to talk a little about what do we mean by leadership legacy. And by the way, we've designed this for all of you, whether you're involved in leadership development or not. Regardless of your role, we want you to take some time today, and we're going to give you some activities to do as well, to think about really what is it that you need to do to help develop your own legacy. We're going to talk about 4 components of leadership legacy that we will kind of give you some information about and kind of help you have some reflection time on as well. And we'll have David to share a little bit about Waste Management's leadership program and something that they call Ignite Your Leadership Spirit. We're really excited about the partnership we have with Waste Management for their leaders, and that David and his team really have created. We're really excited to have David to share that with you today. Another key part of this webinar, and perhaps maybe a little different than some of the others you've attended, I don't know, but we wanted to make this a real learning experience for you, something where you really are getting some activities to do some reflection and to kind of just think through what your leadership legacy is all about, to give you a chance to kind of put together an action plan. So thank you again for being here. That's kind of our game plan, and I appreciate your attention and participation. Well, I like to believe that every good webinar and every good session needs to start with a Dolly Parton quote. I don't know why. I just think they should. But this is probably one of my favorite Dolly Parton quotes. It happens to be on the walls of our offices, both in Austin, where I'm based, in Austin, Texas, and in Dundee, Scotland, where our corporate headquarters are for Insights in our office called Terra Nova. The quote has been often questioned as whether it's really Dolly or not, but it is. It was her original words, and it's that if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. And part of what we want to help you guys think about today, and what David and I do, and I think I hear David in the background. Hi, Mr. David Voorhees. How are you, sir?
Good.
Good. You're back with me, right? I wanted to make sure that was you. I thought it was. So we'll let you do an introduction here in just a second. But our focus today is to help you guys think about what does it look like in terms of the legacy that you're creating. Are you helping others dream more? Are you helping them learn more? Are you helping them do more? Are you helping them become more in their own journey of development as they go along the way? Well, we want to ask you guys a question about the term legacy. So using the questions pod in GoToWebinar, and I'm going to kind of take a look at that here. What I'd like for you to do is would like for you to use that questions pod and maybe tell us, how do you define legacy? By the way, you will have the slides available for download from hr.com, so no hesitation for anyone that has that question. You will be getting the content that we have. So while you take a minute and using the questions, just enter as a question, what is your definition of legacy? And we'll get some of those comments coming in to talk about that. David, so while that's coming in, I'm going to just flip back a couple of slides as we're letting people kind of respond to that. And maybe if you could just introduce yourself and a little bit about waste management for people who don't know you.
Absolutely, and thank you everybody for attending today. My name is David Voorhees, Director of Learning and Development, and I have the awesome pleasure of serving several business units within waste management. One being all of our sales organization, our customer experience organization, and some corporate functions as well. And we're a team of learning professionals who design learning in all types of modalities and deliver it to the field to help our clients, our business partners achieve their results. So that's the quick and dirty version, Doug.
Great, thanks, David. And maybe tell a little bit about waste management for folks that may or may not know. Hopefully they know about who waste management is, but just in case.
Absolutely, and hopefully at least a few of you saw Undercover Boss, where our CEO showcased our awesome company. But as you can see here, we do all kinds of great things, starting with collecting the trash off of maybe some of your curbs in those big, beautiful green trucks, and helping businesses remove their waste, as well as coming up with ways to recycle and maybe even not even put their waste in landfills, but find other creative ways and maybe even turn them into energy. So if you see that big green truck driving around town, beep your horn. That's our company. We're all over North America.
Great. Thanks, David. Well, we've got some great inputs coming in response to our question, how do you define legacy? Thank you guys for sending those. A couple of them that have come in so far I just want to comment on. Cindy says it's something you will be remembered for, something that has made a positive difference. Steve says useful, your gifts, what you give others, or so that they might learn something from your own lived experiences. Paige talks about memories. Liz mentions what people say about you after you're gone. I love this one from Caroline, David. She says it's your footprint, what you leave behind, your methods that get passed along, your ideals that are passed along.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that one. What about, David, how about you? Before we go to the next slide, how do you define legacy? And kind of, you know, when you think about leadership at Waste Management and other places that you've been at, how would you define it?
Well, Doug, you know that I want my legacy to be while I'm alive, and I'd also like my legacy to surround me and be something that I've created while I'm with my organization, while I'm here at Waste Management. And so we've talked at length about a reputation, and it's awesome to have a reputation that you can be proud of. But I want it to be a more long-lasting and more robust and impactful reputation, and that's what I think a legacy is all those things that we just heard on that one poll response, but to have it while I'm here doing the job.
I love that. You know, one of the things that David and I talked about when we're putting this content together for you guys was this idea of the difference between reputation versus legacy. That reputation is really what people say about you, but legacy is what people will remember about you. And it is typically more about the impact that they have. Now, I also talk about a lot when I do my leadership development work, I talk a lot about the fact that legacy is not what happens when you leave the planet. As leaders, legacy is what happens when you leave the room. So how do you as a leader, regardless of your role, and by the way, when we say use the term leader, David and I are not meaning just people who report in to have teams reporting into them. We believe that even if you're a frontline professional, that you are a leader and you have a responsibility to think about what your legacy is. So today what we're going to talk to you about and what we want to kind of share is this idea of how can you begin to think about what people remember about you and looking at it from 4 different perspectives. And we'll share a little bit about how David and his team have been helping the leaders at their organization at Waste Management do just that. Great quote from Marian Anderson, who was a very famous African-American dancer in the 20th century. She said, leadership should be born out of the understanding of the needs of those who would be affected by it. And when I think about that quote, it's not about what you think your legacy should be and how you perceive it. It's about how the people that it impacts perceive it. In other words, what is it that the people that you work with, that are on your teams, that are working around you, how do they perceive you? It's all about, it's kind of like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The same thing is true here with leadership. Leadership is only seen through the eyes of the followers, if you will, or the people that are around you as a leader. Now, one of the things that we talk about at Insights, and I shared this a little bit earlier, but this is my job as the head of people development at Insights, is that I want to create an organization where people are truly understand themselves and others and are inspired to make a positive difference in everything they do. That's the legacy that I want to have in the team that I create. And so for me, there's a couple of key words there. I want people to understand themselves and others. There's something about understanding for me. There's something about people being inspired, and then there's about making a positive impact. So think about your own personal vision. If you don't have a personal mission statement or vision statement, it might be good to consider what would be those core words that might make a difference for you. What would it be that if the words that you would put in color, if you will, or that you would highlight for yourself? What we want to do today is share with you a model that will kind of help you to think a little bit about leadership legacy from a holistic perspective. This is from our Insights Transformational Leadership content that we're going to be sharing with you today, and it's some content that David and his team have adapted inside of Waste Management as well. But we want to talk to you about these 4 components of leadership legacy. Now, most of the time when we think about leadership, we talk about results. Everybody knows about results. But there's more to it than that. There's the relationships. There's what we call centered leadership and visionary leadership. And we want to kind of talk to you a little bit about these today, and then David and I are going to kind of go back and forth a little bit on them. So as we do, as David and I talk about these items, think about where your attention is focused as a leader in your role and in your responsibility. So David?
Absolutely. So the first one, Doug, I think is results leadership, and it's a great topic for me to share because we work for a corporation that is results driven, and it's really our culture, making sure that everybody is focused on the end goal or focused on their objectives. It doesn't mean by any means that we're not paying attention to our other manifestations, but it's helping people to consistently achieve those results and actually not just achieve them, but to go beyond, to exceed them. There's such great pride that can be found there. And really, that's part of our legacy in general, is achieving and exceeding results. We take great pride in that. And moving forward, absolutely understanding that it doesn't just end this year. It's like your legacy. You continue to build and refine it.
Great. Now, obviously, with results, we also have to have relationships because we can't deliver results all by ourselves. I say that, and yet I know I've had some leaders in my life or encountered some leaders that thought they could do it all by themselves. But the reality is that relationship leadership is a critical piece. I love this quote from Jack Welch that before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. But when you become a leader, success is all about growing others. And when we talk about your leadership legacy in terms of your relationship leadership, it's about how are you developing the potential and seeing the potential in the people that you work with. How are you in terms of cultivating in collaboration? Are you seen as someone that collaborates, that works well together? As we used to say when we were children, do you play well with others? You know, do you enable the potential of others? And what are you doing to create a sense of community in your team? So again, as we're going through these, I invite you to think about where are your strengths right now? Where are your development areas right now in these 4 areas? You know, at Insights, people often ask us about the culture when they come to work here, and we did a set of interviews just yesterday that I was walking some new candidates through, and they ask us about the culture. And as a company, we are highly results and relationship focused. In other words, you have to deliver the results, but you also have to be able to manage the relationships and consult and be collaborative. That relationship side of things, if you don't pay attention to it, given the work that we do as a company, as an organization helping develop leaders and develop teams, that's critical. So absolutely, these first 2 are the ones that are that kind of want to have you start to think about. Let's look at the third one, though, David.
Yeah, Doug, it's interesting. Our companies are so different, but so far they're very much the same in those 2 manifestations. Now, visionary leadership is something that I love, and I know enough about myself to know that this really is me. And I love this quote too. Of course, everybody loves Walt Disney. But I test my dreams against my beliefs. I dare to take risks, and I execute my vision to make those dreams come true. Absolutely true. And I love when I begin to see leaders grow and expand when you think about this quote. And maybe you have a favorite quote as well about somebody that you consider to be a visionary. But somebody who looks outward and sees possibilities, possibly where others don't see it, and engaging others, getting them excited about that vision and bringing it to life, drawing that painting, if you will, about that vision and getting others excited about it. We probably all can think of those types of leaders that we've had in our past. I know I've got a couple examples, even those right here at Waste Management. So I think that that probably Insights has the same type of leaders as well.
Absolutely. It's, you know, for us, it shows up a lot of times in innovation or looking outside at our future strategy. Where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years or more? It certainly is about looking at what's possible. We do a lot of work in our models with some of course, psychological type, and the idea of intuition, the preference of intuition being very connected to visionary leadership, of looking at the big picture and looking out as well. The last
Doug,
one,
you made,
yeah, go ahead.
You made a comment earlier too, and when I think about somebody having a title as a leader, that's awesome, but I love when I see people on my own team who are individual contributors but who have visionary leadership. And that really helps the rest of the team see what our potential is and how we can help our business partners. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you. Now, the fourth piece is one that you might be surprised to find in leadership, and I have to say in our organization, when we developed this model, this was something at the time in the early 2000s was a little new. People weren't talking a lot about things like mindfulness in leadership and some of the work that we're now seeing coming out around positive psychology and neuroscience. But it's the concept of centered leadership. And this great quote from Peter Drucker really sums it up. Follow effective action with quiet reflection, because from the quiet reflection will come even more effective action. You've probably noticed by now that these are coming in pairs, results and relationship, visionary versus centered. Where the visionary leader looks outside of themselves at what's possible, the centered leader looks within. They really are looking in that space of seeing their own self-awareness, being clear about their own perspective, their values, their motivations, aware of their own emotional impact on the team and on others around them. There's also a level of being self-assured enough that they can learn from mistakes and not let those mistakes derail them. There's a resilience that comes into play when we talk about centered leadership. And of course, being alert to the present. One of the things that we're seeing in some of the leadership research around things like mindfulness and the brain theory and neuroscience is that this area, and the area of resilience in particular, is probably one of the most critical pieces for leaders to be successful going forward. We've been doing great on results and great on relationship, and we've talked about vision a lot, but something tells me this one might be one of the game changers for the future. So as we kind of come to the conclusion of those four, just to pause for a second, we want to invite you to think again. Where is your attention focused right now? Which of these four would you say is your strongest? Which is the one that maybe you feel like is the one you do the most with? We're going to do a poll here in just a moment, but I want you to just kind of take a minute to look again at these four areas. And I also want you to think of, is there an area you'd like to develop? And we're talking about legacy today, so I want to invite you to think, what would your colleagues and those around you say is your legacy today? Where are you spending that energy? So let's go ahead and open up our first poll. The first one is, where is your attention right now? So we're going to launch this poll, and if you could, pick which of the four areas would you say your attention is focused as a leader? The answers are coming in. Love seeing those little bars move. That's great. Got about a few more seconds here, guys. 74% of you have voted. Thank you very much for your participation. All right. Looks like what we can see here, Dave, is about 49% of the folks on our call today, 49, 48, are all about relationship leadership. 35% is results, visionary 19%, and only 10% would say centered leadership.
Wow.
Yeah. Any thoughts you have on that kind of order? Relationship, results, visionary, and then centered?
I think the most meaningful part of the poll to me is the centered leadership. I hear so many people in not just in my industry but in our trade talking about showing up, how you show up at work, and are you authentic? And so I think that the statistics about centered leadership perhaps being on the lower end of that is people have an opportunity to really think about what it means to be an authentic leader and how you show up as a leader. So it's good to know we have room to grow there.
Yeah, great. So just got the results shared there, guys, so you can now see kind of where we ended up. And again, that 49% relationship. And I think it makes sense, too, by the way. We're on HR.com, so we certainly know that a lot of you are here and you're in the human resources industry, and that's your role, like it is for David and I. And as we look at that, certainly we would probably expect relationship, I think, to be at the top of the list. And I don't know that HR, I don't know that we often get credit for being as visionary as we sometimes are. So I would say I'm curious about that being lower. I wonder what it would look like if we brought more of our visionary legacy to human resources and to our focus on our people in the business. Well, I want to kind of take us to another poll to kind of follow up with this. So that's kind of where's your attention focused now. But what about where would you like to improve it? Where would you like to see your legacy increase? So if there's an area that you'd like to develop, which of these four areas would you like to see an increase in? Go ahead and select and see what, let's kind of get some perspective on that. Great to see the numbers coming in, 53, 57% of you voting. Thank you guys for engaging and participating with us. We love that. I wish you could all be just talking and texting. I love the interaction, so thank you very much for that engagement with the polls here as we've been doing that today. I appreciate your support with that. All right, we're going to give you just a few more seconds and we'll close the poll and share the results. If you haven't voted, now's a good time to do it. All right, let's take a look. Okay, well, it looks like visionary leadership is the place where there's the most significant desire for increase, with 48%, 31% wanting an increase in centered leadership, and then almost tied, 15 and 13 for relationship and results, an improvement there. So, yeah, very interesting, David. I think as we were talking, visionary and centered definitely kind of a little flipping the previous poll on its ears just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, today we want to, again, we'll give you some thoughts and some things you can do to maybe kind of think about how you can improve that. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to move through this. I want to share a video with you guys that kind of introduces some of what's happening with David Voorhees' team and the team at Waste Management. This is a video that we did with him not that long ago, so I'm going to open that up and share that with you now. So,
Insights has always been important to me, especially in a corporate environment, to understand how to work with people. We have stepped up to the plate to deliver the company's first ever leadership program for sales. One of the most important sessions in their mind during that week is insights. And so they complete the evaluator and they have a group debrief. It is, in their minds, one of the most important things that they take away. How being more aware of themselves not only will help them work more effectively and productively with their coworkers, but also help them with an entree into the sale. In the past, people who were naturals and could connect with customers and adapt because it was part of their skill set, it was kind of natural, it was easy for them. But for those individuals that didn't possess that skill, it really helped them to understand how to communicate with customers.
great. Let me, perfect. Okay, so I think we're back on the slides now. So, David, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us and tell our our audience here a little bit about what happens in Ignite Your Leadership Spirit at Waste Management.
Absolutely. I don't see the slide yet, but just so you know.
Okay, let's see if we can get that back. Hang on, I will make sure that happens.
So it's absolutely true that prior to a year and a half ago, we didn't have a formalized leadership program. Just not to say that we weren't working towards developing our leaders. There were a lot of different initiatives and little things that we were doing, but nothing really customized for our sales team. And so we had the great pleasure of becoming certified in transformational leadership with Insights. But really, we took what we learned and we customized our approach and the way that was best for the needs of our business and for our leaders. And so transformational leadership was born, and most recently, and this is our first anniversary, so our second year, with a formalized effort, and it's called Ignite Your Leadership Spirit, and we focus on what we took away from Leading in Color and understanding the manifestations that you just had the pleasure of seeing. And here's what we know and what we took away was that we will probably never be 100% proficient in all four of those manifestations. As much as in our heart we'd like to be, we know in our brain that probably, as Doug had mentioned and you saw in the poll, that the one that we are the most successful with, enjoy the most success, and feel the most comfortable with, will continue to grow and nurture that. And there may be one or two others that we're strong in or growing in, but we don't get upset or worried when that blind spot, perhaps for me, centered leadership is the area I would love to grow in, and I would have clicked that on the poll, but I know it's never going to be as good as visionary. And so that's what we want people to understand and to know that in developing that legacy, we have those objectives and focus for our manifestations. So let's go ahead and go to our next slide. So I wanted to share with you how we built this, how we put this together, and we took what we learned from Insights and came back and actually started the action plan during our certification and said, what is this going to look like for waste management? How do we begin the process of really developing world-class leaders and helping people to create their legacies while they're here? And so we started with what we call our leadership launchpad, where people understand their own leadership styles. It's where we call beginning the journey. Understanding the four manifestations, understanding the blind spots, understanding realistically how they can grow in those manifestations. And that was our first year. That's when we came together in 17 locations across the country and had those open and those authentic and robust conversations about our own leadership styles and understanding the styles of others. And so we worked through what we called our leadership framework, where we provided competencies or the skills and the behaviors that are required or needed for your leadership growth. And so throughout that first year after our launchpad, we had several, actually many different resources to use where we could grow and learn the skills and behaviors that supported those wonderful manifestations. And that brings us to year 2, or our anniversary event as we call it. And we had a lot of great opportunities for virtual and classroom education that provided us an entree into Ignite Your Leadership Spirit. So there was a lot of activity, hands-on and learning and classroom and virtual, and a lot of sharing that went on during that year. And then we came back for year 2 with Ignite Your Leadership Spirit. And that event, again, 17 areas across the country came back together, but we wanted to talk about what did you do and how did it impact your personal leadership style and your leadership growth and developing that legacy, and then what were the business outcomes, the effectiveness, how did it help you to grow your business? And we all came to realize very quickly that there was a ripple effect here, that when we developed ourselves, a natural byproduct was the development of others. So our team members and the people that helped us to live our own legacy and perhaps our vision were understanding that they were getting developed along the way. So that was awesome. And so our vision for 2016 and beyond is to shake it up a little bit and do something a little bit different, and maybe not in a classroom style, but to create what we're calling our Leadership Summit, where 3 or 4 times a year we would feature a workshop, a summit if you will, where people from all business units would come together and work on leadership challenges and share their best practices. And we think that's probably going to be our crowning achievement, where people will understand that they can build that legacy while they're in the job. And so that's our journey. That's where we started, and that all started with understanding ourselves and knowing how we show up and how authentic we are as leaders. And then the next slide. It is super important for us in each of both the Launchpad as well as Igniting Your Leadership Spirit to really reflect on the journey and to not just check the box and say this was a training event, but to understand the power of keeping this as our focus, of staying focused on our manifestations. Mapping the course, you saw that we are helping to put together a roadmap for that journey, but understand that it begins with you, but it doesn't have to end with you. That's the most important part about that legacy. But what we walked away with is understanding this year and our anniversary of our leadership journey is that there are many hidden strengths that we have. We're not going to go after those skills and behaviors that are our weakest or that we think we need to grow immediately. So let's go to the next screen and let me show you a visual about just exactly what that hidden strength is. We look within our leadership manifestations, and Doug did that for you on the poll so beautifully, where he said, tell me where you spend a lot of your time, where you feel the most confident, the most comfortable, the most successful. But now let's also talk about the areas where maybe you have a blind spot or you'd like to grow a little bit more. So understanding where you need to grow, where you want to grow, is super, super important for the next step. And we'll show you that on the next slide. So when we talk about those hidden strengths, we know, and maybe you've seen this 70-20-10 concept before in other areas, but what we know is those natural strengths, maybe that manifestation that we just talked about that you recognized on the poll. And for me, my natural strength is visionary. That's where I enjoy my success, where I'm most comfortable. But I also mentioned to you that I felt my weakness was in centered, and while I'm never going to be perfect at that, I want to be well-rounded. I want to have a good understanding of it, and so I recognize it in others. But where we find the most room for development in our leadership abilities and moving towards creating that legacy is within our hidden strengths. So that's the 70% of those competencies, or those skills and behaviors, where we're neither strong nor weak, but we know that if we develop them, we can push them over the finish line a little bit quicker. So that's where, as an organization, we're spending our time in developing our leadership legacy is in our hidden strengths. And just keep in mind that that ripple effect is so awesome. When we're working on our own development, we're naturally developing the skills and behaviors of those who help us in our endeavors to be a successful organization.
Great, thanks, David. So, it's interesting as you. Before we go on, I want to comment on this because for me, this has been a big issue, and we had a question come in that I think was really relevant to this, and it's that Randy has said that let me just kind of pop it out here. He said that not to diminish the other three, but if the focus isn't on results, we may not get the opportunity to develop the other three. Key is using the other three to support results. And I think it's interesting because I think that may be different, Randy, for different people. I know for me, if I put all my energy on results, where that may not be a natural strength of mine, in fact, my natural strengths are more relationship and visionary leadership, that I need to kind of get to results through relationships, through vision. It's not that I wouldn't focus on delivering the results, it's the how I get there. And so I think what I love about this model that you're sharing, David, is how it takes the three buckets of skills. And so, yes, I've got to get to those other areas. And I've got to create that legacy in all four areas, technically. But how do I create space for myself to tap into my natural strengths, to really connect with the hidden strengths as well, to be able to get into those areas of results that I'm going to be delivering? Because bottom line, if we say delivering results is what we all have to do, we all have to achieve our goals, achieve our tasks, but do we do it through results-focused leadership? Do we do it through leadership or relationship-focused leadership? I would say it might depend on the person. You've got to make sure you've got all pieces of it. So I'd love that you share this model, David. It's great.
And Doug, thank you for that, because we feel very strongly that our goal is to become well-rounded leaders. We're not going to be experts in all four manifestations, but we want to be well-rounded. And in an effort to get there, we need to understand where to start in that journey of developing as a leader. And so we start with our hidden strengths. But it's a great question.
Great.
And then on our next slide, it's been such a pleasure to learn of the successes that we're finding in each of our areas. In fact, several of our market areas have created best practice videos that have been absolutely igniting for me and helped me to understand that as we begin that journey, people are adding something new to their game. They're doing something they've never done before. That old saying, the aha moments, are happening on a regular basis. Groups of leaders are getting curious about the world around them and trying things they've never tried before. And in our case, these manifestations that are not, if you will, our culture, the results, we know that we're not going to achieve the results without calling on the other leadership manifestations. So it's helped them to step out of their comfort zone, and that's where the growth begins, right? And of course, if you want to have that leadership legacy, you can't keep doing. When I had a vice president, everybody's heard of this before, that always used to say to me, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And our leaders are looking outside of that and trying new things, or getting outside of that comfort zone. And it's a privilege to see the growth in our leaders. And I'm excited because we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, it is so exciting for sure, and we've had some. Part of what we wanted to do today is to share with you a little bit about some of what's been happening at Waste Management, some of what's happening at Insights, and we're going to give you some space for questions here as well. But we want to encourage you as we kind of come to the conclusion of kind of the presentation portion, so we get to some questions in the next before we end at the top of the hour. We want to ask you to think about, what conversation do you need to have? Now, it may be a conversation with yourself. If you think back to that poll where we said, where did you need to, what areas of the legacy, which of the areas did you need to improve in, did you need to develop? What needs to happen? What's the conversation you need to develop? I love the quote from the author Susan Scott. She talks about, never be afraid of the conversations you're having, be afraid of the ones you're not having. So what conversations are you not having? So we've got some questions that we'll share with you, but David, I'm wondering if as you take a look at some of these questions, and I'll do the same, if there's one that kind of stands out for you, rather, in terms of something that kind of resonates for you when you think about what you're where you need to develop in your own legacy, in your own area of leadership.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's one that stands out to me as I read this list, and it's the third bullet item, and it's, what would you like to see happen next in your career? And we talked a lot in the beginning about what that legacy means. So for me, I really want, whether it's a position, promotion, whatever it is, I want mine to be a result. And so my legacy, or development of my legacy, I see as an impact that is meaningful and memorable as a contribution towards the success of my company, but specifically towards the success of our leaders, and especially for me, the people on my team. So having that meaningful and memorable impact that people could say, that's Voorhees' legacy right there. That's really what I'd like to see.
Yeah. We've had another question come in from Marcy. She says, what are some of the key activities we can do to assess our individual 3 buckets to be well-rounded? How can we do work on improving them? And I think in some ways, while we do have some ideas we're going to be sharing with you in a follow-up email that everyone will get, we also want you to think about just your own role, because for your role it may be different, and for each of your roles. My favorite question on here is the 5th one, actually. It's what do you need to embrace or let go of to make that happen? So if for me, I know one of my focus areas is to improve some of my visionary leadership. While it's a strength of mine, I've been a little caught up in some results focus lately and some equally some relationship leadership lately. And I need to get back to thinking about what's the vision, what's the strategy for my team, and where do I need to go? How am I thinking outside the box as an innovative leader? And in order to do that, I have to have time for that. I have to have time to take time for myself to research, to do personal development, to go out and look and see what is it I need to know to bring the best of what's happening in our industry back to our own organization. And in order to do that, I have to let go of some things. So I'm going to have to let go of perhaps maybe not participating in every meeting that I get invited to, or I may have to think about, I may have to embrace some of the what I call my go to the mountain time. And my go to the mountain time is when I sit in my desk and I am at my computer and I just follow a little internet hole, basically. I find an article that I'm really passionate about, found a great one this morning on corporate culture and well-being that I loved, and kind of follow where that leads me, kind of look at some of the research and start to get a little bit more big picture thinking for myself. For each of you, it might be different, and these are just a couple of questions to consider. What is your legacy going to be? And again, while some of these questions are maybe about career, it may not be that you're going to change your career, but it may be that you need to think about what are the pieces in your leadership that you want to have a year from now, and how do you get closer to that? There's a great quote that when's the best time to plant a tree? The answer is 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Today, because that's when you actually can begin to create space for the trees of the future. And in the same way, we say don't wait until the end of your career to leave the legacy you deserve. We want you to manage it from the beginning. So we'd like to open it up for questions from you guys, and we'd love to hear any of your questions for David or myself. So we're going to use the question and answer pod. And I'm thinking too, David, if either of us, we might want to come back to, I may bring the slide up on the 4 areas or the 4 manifestations to see if there's some other specific tips where we can answer Marcy's question about how can we be more well-rounded in our 4 areas, if there's some tips that we have. Certainly we'll have an email that'll come out on that, Marcy, so stay tuned for that for sure. But now would be a great time if you have any questions, just go ahead and use the question and answer pod. We're going to give some time for that, and then we'll have a little bit of a wrap-up as well.
Doug, with those last 6 points and what you were saying, one of the questions that I receive on a regular basis, especially as we tour through the country and we interact with our sales leaders, or questions or comments is, Dave, I can't afford the time out of my day to do this. I can't afford the time. And honestly, one of my answers is to them, can you afford not to if you're trying to create that legacy? And so that's always a big question. Where am I going to find the time to do this? Doug, you just made a comment about finding that internet time, or I mentioned to my team, take an hour out of your day and grab that book that you've been sitting on this shelf and you wanted to read it because it's going to help you develop. Take that time, commit yourself to that time, have a discipline about it, just like you have about other tasks within your career. Make that time happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's kind of how do we, again, I'm going to just kind of move back a few slides to those 4 manifestations. I'll use this one here. How do we kind of create space for that? And it is hard because, candidly, when you reach a certain point in your career, it's almost like we stop thinking about developing ourselves. We stop thinking about we've got to keep growing, we've got to keep learning. Well, my personal perspective is I don't want to stop learning until I leave the planet. Like that's my goal, is I want to keep learning till the day I die. So really thinking about what do I need to develop in each of these areas to grow myself, to grow my own legacy in that regard. We do have a couple of questions coming in. Encourage a couple more of you to send them our way. We'd love to have those coming into the Q&A pod. We have one from Mustafa. He said, you mentioned in the intro that about reputation. Isn't it true that a leader will attain both reputation and legacy with some balance? Great question, Mustafa. I think for me, reputation is temporary, and it's often what doesn't get said to your face, to be very candid. It's what other people say about you when you're not listening. It's kind of like the verbal blind spot, or the blind spots about you. Sometimes it's good, and hopefully it is always good for most of us as leaders, but there's something different about legacy. It is more impactful. It is less about what people talk about. It is more about how people are impacted and what they remember you for. And that certainly feels like that for us. That's certainly why we distinguish between reputation and legacy in that regard. So thank you for your question, Mustafa. I've got another question from Erica for you, David. I don't know if this is something you guys are willing to do, but I'll just at least I'll pass the question along. It says, is Waste Management willing to share any of the modules or material they've developed for the leadership program? So obviously some of the content I will say is from Insights, so that's something that you certainly can you can contact us for. But David, anything that you've shared publicly in other sessions that you'd be willing to share?
Well, I can tell you that that I would love to have anybody that has any questions or concerns or wants to have a conversation about it to please contact me, and we can have that benchmarking conversation, and I'm more than happy to share it. I don't know to what extent I can actually give you the modules. That's right. A great question. I'm kind of on the spot here, so I don't really know the answer to that. I can find out, but I'd love to have the conversation in more detail, more than just what we did today. Absolutely.
Great, and definitely got to thank you for that one back in the questions. Thank you. Question from Michael. All of this seems to be about self-awareness of your leadership strengths. In that sense, it seems that centered leadership needs to be the foundation, yet appears to be undervalued per the poll from earlier. Thoughts on that? David, what are your thoughts on that one?
Wow.
It's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I have to believe that, and it depends on your situation, your work situation, the culture of your company. I have to believe that the four manifestations are all active. They're all important to be well-rounded, and that you may be required or may be necessary for you to call on one more than the other. But I absolutely agree that you have to be well-rounded and understand all four. And I think that that's a great personal reflection, that centered leadership is awful important. We saw that it had the lowest ranking on the focus of the four manifestations. So I think it says a lot about people versus product, results versus commitment and loyalty. I think that's a great discussion for any organization to have.
Yeah, I think my response to that, Michael, would be that I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. I think it has to be very personal, and it has to be very unique to the organization you're in. Our belief at Insights is that it is about the balance of all. It's about the tension between the opposites, that you can't be so visionary and so looking outside of yourself that you're not also looking within. You can't be so results focused that you're not also dealing with relationships. It's the tension of those opposites that is where the magic happens. So rather than it being a foundation, it's holding centered leadership at the same time you're holding visionary. Holding relationship at the same time you're holding results, and it's that balance of those that kind of brings it to play. So thank you for your question very much. Great questions, guys, coming in. Got a couple more here I want to just share as well. Marcy Jackson says, how can one best identify blind spots? Past that, if my organization is in the middle of chaotic change, is there a leadership manifestation that I should cultivate before others? Well, I certainly think in terms of blind spots, the number one way to do that is to ask questions. Ask for feedback. One of the things that I believe very strongly is that if you have people in your life that are willing to give you authentic feedback, they are gifts to be treasured because they are committed to your success. So my belief is have conversations. Certainly you can do assessments and things like that. Certainly Insights has tools that we can help with. But beyond that, it really is about having the conversation. It's about understanding how can one best identify your blind spots. Ask the people what they see that you don't. I think that's a critical piece.
Doug, let me add to that a part of our program, and it's an annual journey for us, we use a 360 process. And we have situations where we've had leaders that haven't really put that much time and effort into it and have come to the session and not gotten the feedback, and they've been disappointed because they saw the effect that the 360 feedback had on the leaders that got what they asked for, right? They got the truth. They got that gift of feedback. And so what we're seeing is the second time around, those people that maybe didn't make the time to do it jumped on board real quick because they saw the value of getting that feedback. So in our process, we ask the leaders to get feedback from their supervisor, their colleagues, and their direct reports if they have them. And now it's nothing to be scared of. Now they see it as a gift. That's how we find our blind spots, at least from how people perceive us.
Yeah. There's a couple of other interesting questions I just want to but actually before I go to the next question, I want to come back to Marcy's second part. If an organization is in the midst of chaotic change, is there a leadership manifestation that I should cultivate before others? I think it depends on your organization. Change certainly in this model sits under both results and visionary leadership because you are making the strategic choices, you are coming to come up with vision about what the change will be, but equally you've got to be good at building the relationships and bringing people along for the ride. So Marcy, I would encourage you to look at your specific role or the role of your leaders and where has the balance been. One of the great conversations we sometimes will have with leaders is to take a look at these four models, these four manifestations, and ask them, where do we think we're focusing our time now? The same polls we asked you. And then the second question is, in order to achieve this change we're going through or this strategy we're about to deliver, where do we need to shift? Where do we need to put more focus on? Because that helps the leaders be engaged in that conversation to make that happen. There's a couple of interesting points here. Questions. Comment one about centered leadership from Delane. It says, I agree that centered leadership is the current game changer for most leaders. We've gotten to leadership positions because we've gotten results. We've had a vision and we've built relationships. But to take it to legacy capacity, we need to expand our centered leadership experience, and it takes time. My sense is that to sustain results, vision, and relationships requires a centered, self-aware, and present approach. So great thought and a comment from you, Delane. Thank you for that. Not a question, but a great comment and add-in. Really appreciate that for sure. Let me see. I think we're kind of coming to the last few minutes. I want to just check here to see if we've got any final comments. Oh, another good comment coming in from someone. Jean says, I also think that visionary is critical during change. No matter how disappointing the current state is, people are not willing to change if they're not clear about what the change will lead them, where it will lead them to. So another thought for you, Marcy. Great. All right. Thank you guys very much. Let me just kind of go through here again. Any other comments from you, David, as I look to see if there's any final questions we want to bring into play here? We've just got a couple more minutes.
Yeah. So Michael Martinez made just a beautiful comment. He goes, I know the 70-20-10 plan that David described, but how can you become aware of your internal stress that is caused by trying to force yourself to act as a leadership type that you might not be strong at? And that is something that we have a lot of conversation about it in Not Your Leadership Spirit. And so our advice is simply this. If you know it's in that 10% and you know you're never going to be great at it, we're not asking you to spend a lot of time to be aware of it and to understand the importance of it, but know that to take that from your weakest to your strongest is going to absolutely increase your stress level incredibly. Now, please keep in mind, though, in that 70%, there's still going to be a little bit of stress to step outside of yourself and outside of the area where you're comfortable and you're successful. So we ask people to take one skill or behavior at a time to focus on to move forward into that manifestation. And to not worry about that bottom 10% because it will cause you great stress. If, though, however, and more succinctly, if you are in a role that requires you to have strong skill and behavior in their competency, and it's your 10%, I'd like you to consider a different job role, because that could be really bad for your stress level. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is about, there are a couple of questions there about leveraging your strengths or playing the strengths versus developing your potential weaknesses. I think it is a challenge. I think it is important to consider where your strengths are. I do believe, and we do believe at Insights, that you certainly can develop your weak areas. However, the richness comes, and I love this. This is what I love about the 70-20-10 model that David shared. The richness comes when we uncover those hidden strengths, the things that we may not have leveraged, that we may not have been connected to at this stage in our careers, and we may need to kind of bring them more into the place of legacy creating, if you will, where they're the things that we're known for as well. So I think that's us. We're out of time, guys. We want to say thank you. As David has mentioned, our email addresses are here. We'd be happy to talk to you guys if you have questions. As you see in the chat, the archived website and slides will be posted within 24 hours on hr.com, so you can access it at your convenience. You'll also receive a thank you note with some additional content from us at Insights. We appreciate your time, and our hope is that you go out there and build your own legacy as a leader, but also those of your colleagues and team members that you work with. Final thoughts from you, David?
Couldn't have said it better, Doug. Thanks. And know that even if you're beginning your journey, that it's actually a lot of fun. It's
Perfect.
not stressful. It's a lot of fun.
I love it. Thanks, David. We're going to turn it back over to Kathy with HR.com. Thanks, everybody, for your time today.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Doug and David, for presenting this very informative webcast today. The archive webcast and slides will be available on the HR.com site within 24 hours. Please remember you will receive an email from HR.com with the certification credit information within 1 to 2 business days. Insights and HR.com do appreciate your feedback, so please take a moment at the very end of the webcast to complete the evaluation survey, which will appear on your screen. This concludes our webcast, and thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.